Susan Griffith tells the story of the French surrealist poet Robert Desnos. Desnos was part of the French resistance to the Nazi occupation during World War II, and as such, he was captured and sent to Auschwitz. One day, Desnos and others were taken away from their barracks. The prisoners were riding on the back of a flatbed truck. They knew that the truck was going to the gas chamber. No one spoke. Soon they arrived, and the guards ordered them off the truck. When they began to file towards the gas chamber, suddenly Desnos jumped out of line and grabbed the hand of the woman in front of him. He was animated, and he began to read her palm. The forecast was good. A long life, many grandchildren, abundant joy. A person nearby offered his palm to Desnos too. Here too, Desnos foresaw a long life filled with happiness and success. The other prisoners all came to life, eagerly thrusting their palms towards Desnos, and in each case, he foresaw long and joyous lives. The guards became visibly disoriented. Minutes before, they had been on a routine mission, the outcome of which seemed inevitable. But now they became more tentative in their movements. Desnos was so effective in creating a new reality that the guards were unable to go through with their executions. They ordered the prisoners back on the truck and took them back to the barracks. No one went to the gas chamber that day, and Desnos himself was never executed. Desnos' story is one of hope and creativity in the midst of true, seemingly insurmountable horror. His imaginative grace was in wild opposition to what was happening, even to the point of absurdity. But in sharing it, his vision of hope and love became powerful enough to transform everyone around him, even those who were actually out to get him. We can imagine our way into new ways of living and being if we have the audacity to trust our own hearts in the face of despair. We have the power to write and to tell a new story, and thereby bring that story into being in the world. The story that so many people are living in today is incredibly fear-inducing. The facts are stark. Our economy is increasingly stratified. There are new, permanently unemployed groups of people and a growing underclass. The middle class is struggling. And racism, sexism, and heterosexism compound all of these economic challenges. At the same time, fossil fuel-caused climate change, overconsumption, and pollution are threatening the Earth's ability to sustain life as we now know it. So we are facing horror. We're facing an incredible threat, but possibly an incredible transformation. I am, you anxious one. In March, I went to a Unitarian Universalist ecological justice conference in Detroit. Detroit is one of the most poignant examples of this shifting reality, this shifting ground beneath our feet. UU eco-justice leaders from around the country gathered in Detroit to learn from their experience of losing their manufacturing base and to see how Detroit is coping with both poverty and devastating environmental degradation. The city is struggling. It lost 25% of its population between 2000 and 2010. And it has billions of dollars in debt, so it filed for bankruptcy last year. The city is just pocked with abandoned homes and abandoned buildings, boarded up windows, and dogs running through the street. In her book, These Are the Times to Grow Our Souls, activist and author Grace Lee Boggs asks us whether, as a society, we are going to turn away from cities like Detroit, whose apex is tied to manufacturing. Personally, I feel daunted by the scale of the problem. Detroit itself is a large city. Before its precipitous decline, it was one of the biggest cities in the United States. But Detroit's not alone. It's just the most extreme example of the consequences of the shifting pattern of production that's happening across the United States. The pattern of production that's shifting from the Ford model of industrial manufacturing with decent paying factory jobs to a globalized economy that's replacing workers with both technology and with other less well-paid workers around the world. The Rust Belt is full of cities in similar, if slightly less desperate than Detroit, circumstances. The economic devastation in these Great Lakes cities has race dimensions as well. The northern industrial belt with its decent factory jobs was the landing place for many African Americans during the Great Migration of the 20th century. Many Rust Belt cities have significant African American populations and were centers for 20th century Black culture. Detroit is an obvious example of this. The racism compounds the economic disadvantages that are coming as a result of the shift in production. Detroit itself has a majority African American population. 82% of the city is African American. Racism in Michigan politics has seriously exacerbated Detroit's financial meltdown and helped create the current situation that the city is in. My own hometown, Racine, Wisconsin, is also a Rust Belt city. Racine is situated between Milwaukee and Chicago, right on Lake Michigan, and when I was growing up, it produced case tractors and heavy machinery, S.C. Johnson's chemical products and steel products, among other things. Racine is 60% white and 40% people of color, mostly African American and Latino. My beloved Uncle Sam, which is, yes, his real name, moved to Racine in the middle of the 20th century because of all the good-paying factory jobs that were available there. He was part of the heyday of working-class Racine. Lots of jobs, lots of friends, lots of fun. It was a boom town. Now, his children balance retail and service work with factory jobs in order to find a way to pay the bills. The factory work includes periodic layoffs and less stable temporary work. With so much job insecurity and competition for scarce resources, my cousin, who relies primarily on the factory work, he can't get sick, he can't have family crises, and he can't have any say in his work hours or his schedule. When his father died a year ago during the summer, he immediately went back to work. It was during those 100+ degree days that we were having. Were you guys having those too, when it was like 105 or something crazy? And the factory didn't have any air conditioning. So with all the machines running and all of the bodies working in the factory, it was more than 110 degrees in the building while they were working for 12-hour shifts. He told me at the time that he had felt his father's spirit like a cool cloak around him, protecting him. My murmurings surround you like shadowy wings. But what can we do? And what does it matter to Des Moines? What happens in Detroit and these other Rust Belt cities when Iowa's outside of the Rust Belt and Des Moines runs on insurance and financial services? It matters because of the way that these cities might be reborn and what that could mean for how we envision the city itself in the 21st century. It matters as fodder for our imagination. As Grace Lee Boggs put it, we are watching these cities to see how we might rebuild, redefine, and respirit them as models of 21st century self-reliant and sustainable multicultural communities. It matters because even in this city, there are people who are experiencing the effects of the recession. It matters because the recession has hit younger workers the hardest, and because we are having the most trouble recovering and entering the workforce, sometimes for the first time. Young people aren't able to find jobs. It matters because we need to be able to reimagine the rise of the city, reimagine how we might organize ourselves and relate to one another in urban communities. What our Unitarian Universalist eco-justice group saw in Detroit was as much about hope for new ways of living and being in community as it was about suffering and injustice. We learned about people who were coming together and cooperating in new ways because they had to cooperate in order to survive. Boggs bought the vacant lot next door to her for $500 and started holding community meetings and barbecues there. We visited a multicultural, multi-generational community that was growing food together in an abandoned lot in town, and where teenagers were learning from elders while they were turning the earth, where people were creating cross-cultural friendships with their neighbors who they were meeting for the first time because they were growing green beans together. We heard about people in a community pitching in to buy a community 3D printer together in order to produce their own goods. They didn't have the cash anymore to buy goods, but if they produced them together, they could have a self-reliant community, and they began printing the things that they needed. Boggs challenged us to think in terms of small and beautiful community solutions to these huge systemic problems. Where you see beauty, she said, affects your vision of the future. I say she challenged us because I think this is difficult. When I see the big picture, I think in terms of systems. And I feel a frightening disjuncture between a huge system that's deteriorating big and fast, and solutions that are growing up slow and local. Even while we were in Detroit, one of the neighborhoods that was hardest hit by industrial decline and pollution was experiencing displacement from the neighborhood in the numbers of tens and thousands. So how are these small, local, admittedly beautiful solutions possibly going to catch tens of thousands of people in need? But that's the thing about transformation. It's mysterious. It's hidden and sometimes suddenly revealed where we least expect it. We're all traveling along together, flying along looking for the Samorg, and then suddenly, the elusive, magical bird that we've been seeking this whole time is here. It's been growing among us all along. And now that we look in the mirror, we see the Samorg in us, in our own reflections. Might the transformation that we're hoping for happen in ways, in places that we don't expect it? Are there small, beautiful community solutions to this city's systemic problems that are maybe already growing among you? Members of this church have been telling me about your social justice work in the community. Your work with Amos on mental health, juvenile justice, and with Project Iowa. As a community, as a church, you're facing into painful injustices here in Des Moines, racial disparities and economic struggles. You're looking at how unjust systems affect real people's lives, people that you're meeting and getting to know, and you're working in the world to change systems that are causing harm. Now, I have it under good authority that you have become known in the community as the people who show up. This is no small thing. We can say that we care. We can preach about it from the pulpit. We can talk a big game about how committed we are to justice and that we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. But when we actually show up, that's when our principles become embodied in the world. Vulnerable communities are usually very understandably suspicious of liberal do-gooders who say that they're committed to justice. But showing up, and showing up consistently as you're doing here in this church, means that you mean what you say. It means that you can be trusted. And that's how real relationships are built. That's how transformations happens, through the trust of real, cross-cultural, interfaith, multi-generational relationships. These types of relationships across borders are difficult, as some of you may know. They involve stretching. They involve making mistakes. They involve being uncomfortable. They require us to go outside of our comfort zones in order that we might grow our souls. But it's still worth doing because the world needs vibrant, multi-faith, multi-generational communities that are committed to justice work, to sustainability, and to cross-cultural relationship. We have to be in relationship with each other in order to be able to dream together. We can't dream this dream alone. None of us have all the answers. As individuals, we don't. As the church by itself, we don't. We have some really good ideas, but it's when we engage in cross-cultural relationships and relationships across borders that we learn about other pieces of the puzzle and we can dream a bigger dream of justice for everyone. The story is not written yet. It's just beginning. It's being written right now. The new world is growing within you and among you and in your work in the world. As you continue to step into your own hope, as you continue to step into your own power and vision, as you show up and work and dream in partnerships in the community, that world will be unveiled. Now, I can't tell you what it's going to look like. I'm one of thousands of imaginal cells, just like you, that are imagining this new reality together, that are dreaming together of what we might become. I'm hoping that we're transforming into a society that prioritizes people instead of profits. I'm hoping that we're dreaming and bringing into being a society that is sustainable, where my children will grow up to live on the earth that looks kind of like the one that I grew up on. The power of imaginative hope, of my imaginative hope, of each of your imaginative hope, is what creates the possibility of a new story, one that is wildly, even absurdly different than the one that is happening right now. And we have to dream that dream in the face of the despair that we're experiencing, in the face of racial profiling and retributive justice and unemployment and underemployment. The church can be part of writing and telling the new story by engaging in local, multi-faith, multicultural, and multi-generational relationships. It can be part of the new story by showing up and by telling that story and then modeling it in our work and in our relationships with real people. Our impossible vision of hope for the future, our wild, imagined grace, is going to catch on through daring to dream it and sharing it with the people we're in relationship with. The dream will connect us like a little string of lights, spreading one by one and becoming more powerful. As it lights up more and more people, it begins to take shape in the world. May it be so. Blessed be.